Hey, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you.
Hey, Corp Dev.
Okay, my name is Rishi Garg. I run Corp Dev here at Twitter.
I'm Jessica Verrilli, and I lead our consumer-facing acquisitions on the Corp Dev team.
And we are here with two people that you guys all know really well by now. Jeff Seibert and Wayne Chang, the co-founders of Crashlytics. Jeff is the head of mobile platform, Wayne is the head of developer experience. And today, they've shown you what they've been working on, which has culminated to such a great event. I want to say congratulations to you guys. What an awesome show.
Absolutely.
You guys had fun? Good. You guys have seen a lot of the great products that are released today, but what you probably don't know the story of is how companies like Crashlytics end up becoming part of a company like Twitter. And what we thought we would do today is be on stage with a couple of the founders and give you some insight into the ups and downs and all arounds that occur when a company, an entrepreneurial company like Crashlytics, joins another company like Twitter and then works together to create the kind of experiences and the kind of products that you're learning about and experiencing today. So what we wanted to do today is tell you a little bit of the Crashlytics story and how they came to be part of Twitter, and also help answer some questions about what the process looks like. And ultimately, we'll turn it over to you for your questions as well. Sound good? So let me put you on the spot just to get started, Wayne and Jeff. What was the craziest part of the Crashlytics acquisition? I believe it happened, the process started at the end of 2012 and culminated in early 2013. So what was the moment from that you remember as being most noteworthy?
It was over a course of 4 or 5 days, and Twitter flew us out for 2 days. We met with the executive team, and it's the second day is the end of it. And Jeff and I just met before meeting with Jess and other execs there. And before, it was just me and Jeff, and we're just saying, hey, if we get an offer, make sure you don't show any emotions whatsoever. If it's a penny, if it's $1 trillion, don't show anything. Almost sound like you're disappointed, right? So then we walk into the room to Jack Dorsey's conference room, and they're in there, and they say, we thought long and hard about this. We want to make a fair offer. They pass over the term sheet, and I read it, and I'm excited. Like, it's actually real. There's legalese on there. There's the number on there. But I'm listening to my own advice, and I'm like trying not to show it. And I'm feeling 4 sets of eyes like burning into me, right, including Jeff's, and just trying to
and mine.
Including it was really intense, and so I'm like, thank you for the offer. We'll consider it. And the really awkward part was, we were scheduled 10 minutes after that to have dinner. So at dinner time, we didn't even talk about what just happened. So it was just a very surreal moment to go from that, an offer, to just a very casual dinner.
And to kind of put the process in perspective, and we'll zoom out and talk about things beyond just the actual deal process, but this was 2 years ago. And so for the company, this was at the time the biggest deal we'd ever done. It was a new office in Boston where we didn't have a team.
How many people were at Twitter in 2012?
Oh my gosh, 2 years ago?
It was about 1,500, I think.
Yeah, so half the size. And we were going to continue the existing product, continue the brand, and anchor this whole new strategy that you guys heard about. And we were trying to do all of that between December 20th and the term sheet we gave them expired 5 p.m. Christmas Eve on the 24th. So we had 4 days to work through this. I missed my flight home for Christmas. We spent most of that holiday on the phone trying to get agreement together, which came together Christmas morning. So that's kind of a fun, I think, behind the scenes kind of story from the process.
And it's a little inside baseball. Christmas Eve, it expired 8 p.m. Eastern time. It's past 8 p.m. The deal's not together. Jeff's nowhere to be found. I can only reach him through the bat phone or through his girlfriend's phone. And I'm thinking to myself, crap, the deal is expired, the deal exploded. Jeff is going to be so pissed at me.
Meanwhile, I'm thinking Dick is going to kill me.
So maybe, what might be good is just to take a step back, because we have a lot of developers here who are building their own businesses and probably want to understand what the process looks like, both from the perspective of the company and also from the perspective of the acquirer, how did this process start? How did we get to the place where you were having this crazy conversation on New Year's Eve, on Christmas Eve, with an exploding term sheet?
Jeff, I'll let you start with that.
Yeah, so Twitter was one of our big customers at Crashlytics. It had been a pleasure getting to know and work with their team. And when they reached out and Jess called us and was like, hey, we wanted to chat further, we were skeptical. We're like, okay, about what? I mean, Twitter's a great customer of ours. We really don't see how these two things come together at all. And what was so fascinating for us is as we met with the leadership team, they pitched us this vision of how they saw the mobile ecosystem developing. And it matched almost point for point with what Wayne and I had been thinking about and brainstorming and pitching our investors on how we were going to grow Crashlytics and turn it into ideally $1 billion company, which is what you have to pitch your investors. And so by seeing those similarities, it struck us that we could actually team up and build this together and sort of leverage the infrastructure that Twitter brought to the table, tie that with the developer experience that we were known for and just our deep understanding of the developer space. And so we were not looking to be acquired by any stretch. We were entirely wondering, hey, how could we do something that would make our goal, our ability to solve these challenges that mobile developers had, how could we solve those even more quickly? And I think it became clear that doing it together was the right way.
And that's really the heart of our process. When we shared a little bit of the fun of like the negotiation over a couple days, but to be honest with you, the heart of an M&A process is about building alignment with the founders of a company and understanding what is it you guys set out to build and hearing through that vision and understanding how that may intersect with what we want to build. And it was clear about 2 years ago, like you heard today, at the time we had ambitions of being a mobile first company, but truly a mobile platform company. Yet, if you looked internally, we weren't there yet. We were still doing a lot of our launch meetings, looking at web screenshots, and had just a couple dozen people committing mobile code. So we had a ways to go. And when we sat in that conference room and started whiteboarding, what would it look like if we were doing this together? And that was our leadership with their leadership. Those are the moments that if that starts to come together, that is the heart of the M&A process. And that's actually the hardest part to get right. But when that clicks, then you can get through everything else really quickly. Like we alluded to.
Yeah. And so, when you guys think about what that process ultimately led to, how did you feel about the way that post the acquisition, what you wanted to accomplish during the acquisition process actually came to be? How did the integration end up working so that you could actually achieve what you wanted to set out to achieve as part of Twitter?
Yeah, this is what really struck us, and both Wayne and I had been through prior acquisitions, so we had some idea of what the process was like. And Twitter blew both of us away in how professional and clear and transparent they were in dealing with through this process. Obviously, it's a very heated negotiation, but at the end of the day, if you're totally open about what your goals are and what you're hoping to get out of it from both sides, that's the way to ensure the deal is successful. And we sort of set all these expectations way at the beginning, and we wanted to continue to focus on developer tools and keep the brand and keep the product and add on to that and keep building towards this platform. And that's exactly what Twitter supported and has stayed true to that. And so we ended up closing the deal. And remember, Crashlytics was started in Boston, so we're 3,000 miles away. The Monday after, 10 people from Twitter show up to help introduce and meet everyone, to help us integrate, get set up with all new computer systems. And 2 of the people actually stayed with us for weeks after that, ensuring that everything was going smoothly. We were incredibly impressed.
Yeah, and this is a big part of the value that comes out of an M&A transaction, because for a lot of people, it sounds like the deal is sort of the end point. But in reality, it's the beginning. The idea is for it to be the starting point of building something great together over the long term. And so we spent a lot of time during the deal process trying to flesh out what does that integration likely look like? How do we make sure we have enough flexibility so as the market develops, we can weather the twists and turns of the deal and of the product, but also try to stay true to the vision that we've put together at the beginning. So we invest a lot of time sort of in that part of the process. So looking back on it, what are some of the pieces of advice sort of that you guys would have or that you would give maybe to yourselves or to these developers here as they're thinking about building their companies, ultimately selling their companies? and working with a strategic partner like Twitter, how would you think about a couple of words of wisdom?
Yeah. One thing that we were concerned about was, is Crashlytics going to change after the acquisition? So the way that I tell the story is, before the acquisition, imagine railroad track, and there's like a small red cart, and that's Crashlytics. During the acquisition, they're constructing like a nuclear rocket around it, and then post-acquisition, they just lit that thing on fire. So basically, we're going the same path, just a million miles an hour. So, today's the announcement of what we have been working on, and this was our vision from the beginning. So we're incredibly lucky to be where we are today.
I'd say another thing to really keep in mind, particularly from the founder point of view, is I believe people tend to over-optimize on the day of the deal. They're excited about, the fact I sold, and what is the price, or what was the outcome, or so on. You're completely underestimating the importance of the ensuing 4 years that you guys are going to be working together, at 4 years minimum, that you're going to be working together as partners and creating something. And it goes back to the moment you raise funding, and you're sitting there at the table, and then the investor asks you, so what is your goal? What's your exit strategy? Are you building this to IPO, or are you building this to be acquired? And I've never understood that question, because in my mind, it's assuming two definitions of success, neither of which I agree with. I didn't start the company to exit it. I started the company to solve a problem. And so how does exiting it solve that problem? The only way to look at an acquisition and to really evaluate an acquisition opportunity is, does that move you closer to solving that problem? And so the day Crashlytics was acquired was certainly not the day we were successful. The day Twitter IPO'd is certainly not the day we were successful. We're still not successful today. We have a long way to go. We want to help every single app developer on Earth, and maybe one day we can be successful at that. So as you're evaluating acquisition opportunities, I would try to stay true to your original vision.
And I would add, on the M&A side, these are the types of conviction that make a company like Crashlytics feel like it's the bet you want to place. Founders that are so convicted about building this for the long term. And we set out to make this real in the world. And if we can do this better with you guys, then that's compelling. But if you're like, you guys were fundamentally not interested in just exiting.
Right.
And so that's simultaneously exactly what we look for in founders and founding teams. And I would add, we talked a lot about getting alignment early in the process. Some of the more details, or kind of one level below that, are questions around, what would a roadmap look like if we were building this together? Just at a high level, what are the key things we would try to launch? And a lot of what you guys heard about today was sketched out on a whiteboard in the middle of those conversations, where they said, we feel like developers are going to need crash reporting and beta testing and analytics and a way to monetize and build social functionality, and it all came together. And certainly it's just the beginning, but it's nice. I think discussing that roadmap is a key part of that conversation, as well as what types of roles individually excite you guys and allow you to continue to have the influence and expertise and ownership that you have now, but potentially even broader. And so those are some of the things I think I would encourage you to think about if you end up in a similar position.
Yeah, I think most people are surprised at how much the team matters in the course of the M&A process in terms of the evaluation, and it's usually the number one most important thing. In a world that is so fast-moving and changing, we are not betting on a company to try to then, just have the product. You're betting on what the future holds and your ability with that team to accomplish that future goal. So very well said by all of you. With that, I would love to turn it over to questions. I imagine there's some folks who have questions about the process. I think we have someone with some mics coming around here. So, yes.
Maybe get started over
We have
there.
one right over there.
Thanks. I had a question, just I guess a little bit expand on what you guys said. So in other companies that made acquisitions, for example, like Google that bought YouTube, and let's say Amazon that bought Twitch, these were companies that had problems with infrastructure. So these larger companies came and acquired them and helped provide the bandwidth or the video and so forth. But it seems like your guys' original goal was to provide mobile development, and that while Twitter is phenomenal and a tremendous platform, it's something that could have been attained maybe without the acquisition. So I'm curious what the thought process was there, because, for example, by being acquired by Twitter, there are other maybe competitors that won't want to use the services. So I'm just curious what your guys.
Yeah, great question. So yes and no. I think we saw Twitter from two sides. One, that Twitter's just brand and stature in the community could be a huge accelerator on making our products more of a de facto standard amongst the mobile community. The other aspect is there are certainly products we announced today that we could not have built as a startup. Digits could not have been built by a startup. It relies on operator agreements with every carrier on Earth. There is no way you could pull that off. And so it's a combination of both sides.
Great question.
What did the team look like when you were acquired? How many people and who? Like what percentage of developers versus business people are there? And also, what was your traction like? How many kind of customers the same size as Twitter did you have? Like, where were you?
Great question. So we were a team of 18, 14 of which were engineers. And I'm not even counting myself and Wayne in that, even though we also did a lot of coding. So the vast majority of the team was engineering. And that was our mission from the beginning, is we wanted to build a great developer product. We felt we had to have a team that everyone here could trust. And so we wanted to hire great engineers and have the team entirely engineer driven. And then just in terms of market, we had raised 2 rounds of funding, totaling $6 million. We were on hundreds of millions of devices. The SDK was broadly used, but it has ramped significantly since then.
Cool. Another question?
Come back here.
Over there.
Sorry, excuse me.
So before you were about 16, 18 people before Twitter acquired you guys, you could make decisions really quickly. You didn't have to report to a committee. You joined Twitter. Twitter's very entrepreneurial. It's still very young. But do you think that there was like a huge difference in cultures, or was Twitter just as agile as you guys were?
Yeah, the interesting thing is during the acquisition process, we actually got multiple offers. And one of our things wasn't just like the deal price or all that kind of stuff. It was the culture behind it. And at Crashlytics, I mean, none of us actually were part of, actually entered the Twitter HQ. The moment we stepped in there and we met with Jess, met the team over there, we realized that the culture meshed really, really, really well. That was important for us. We visited other places, and some were more corporate or more, IBM-ish, which is not us. We're more laid back. We like to build stuff and also have fun at the same time, and that was Twitter back then, and it's still Twitter today. So the culture piece of it was hugely important for us.
I would add a little bit around, hey, does it become more bureaucratic? Does it slow you down when you go through an acquisition? That's one of the reasons we spend so much time during the core M&A conversation talking about roadmap and goals. We even literally, when we closed this deal, we had this like 10-page single-space document that was like, here's what we're doing in Cambridge. All the hiring forecasts were pre-approved. You kept your recruiter. I mean, we were talking about this, who's amazing and excellent, so they could continue to scale in Cambridge. We talked about the key product releases. We got alignment on, will folks be relocating to headquarters? And that was something that Jeff wanted to come back to San Francisco over time, build relationships with folks internally. So I think one way to combat that, which I think can be common, is front load all of that, so the day the deal closes, you're just off to the races. Got one more over there.
Yep.
Question. Yep.
Hi. So I'd be curious to know if you're allowed to say who else from the Twitter side you guys were considering when you were looking for an acquisition. And also, what were some of the things that were important to you about Crashlytics before you really started engaging with them?
So there's a couple reasons why we ended up building a relationship with Crashlytics. Rishi talked about how the team is so important. Jeff's actually somebody I've known for a very long time, and was just one of those people in the industry who always wanted to know what he was doing next. So I think the initial conversations, we had reached out thinking maybe we would partner and maybe we'd be a customer, because we had seen in the ecosystem all these developers giving them really positive feedback, thanks to a lot of the work you had done, Wayne. And our mobile team was at a point where we were exploring how are we going to scale mobile development throughout our company, and what are we thinking about more broadly in terms of mobile platform. So that's where the conversation began. We were constantly meeting companies, and so there's a ton of conversations that happen in parallel. But when the stars align for an acquisition to actually take place, it tends to be this like very special feeling that like this team is exceptional. The group of customers using their products are the best in the whole industry, including us. And what they want to build is exactly what we want to build. So this feels like it fits.
Yeah, and I would add to that also, Crashlytics is a good example of how those stars sort of perfectly align. Generally speaking, though, we do meet a lot of companies, and sometimes you take a tops-down approach where you say, I want to acquire X product. Okay, let's look at all the companies, let's try to figure out who is most aligned and figure out a set of criteria, and it's a very structured process. Other times, you are simply letting the incredible creativity that exists in the developer ecosystem guide you and inform your product strategy. And then it becomes very opportunistic. And so there's both what I'd call sort of a bottoms-up approach to great M&A transactions that lead to the kind of products you saw today, but also a tops-down approach. And I think this is a good example of one that was really kind of that opportunity for a great company to sort of join that really led us to work together.